But now we're moving into our project. And what we wanted to do this afternoon was really talk about, one, our project, and two, how it stemmed from MadRep's Advanced Now strategy. And our project focuses on the issue of increasing diversity on boards, councils, and commissions throughout our local area. Through our project, we've come to believe that those two concepts are directly related. So what is our project? One, we wanted to create a formalized process to be able to find, source, and track openings on boards, councils, and commissions. And then second, we wanted to be able to find and keep track of qualified candidates to sit on those boards and fill those opportunities. So our goal today is really to educate you all on the various aspects of that project, and also to seek your help. So thank you so much for doing the homework and reading the articles. I'll assume everybody did. I know that they were really detailed articles, so thanks for spending the time to do that. But let me go over kind of our agenda for this afternoon. We'll kick this off with a wonderful panel of guests here to talk about diversity as a driver of economic development and tie those things together. We'll then have a break, but then we'll come back to a breakout session and we'll talk about a grassroots perspective of what that looks like. And then finally today, I shouldn't say finally, that skips over the scavenger hunt. We do have the United Way coming in to deliver some aspects of their formal board training program. So we think you'll get a lot out of that, and we're looking forward to going through that. And finally, we will finish with a scavenger hunt, which will end on the roof with the chickens and also some beer and wine. So we'll have a fun afternoon. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Betsy to introduce our panel.
Yes, great. And actually, before I introduce our esteemed panelists, I wanted to just introduce our guests back there. Two of my colleagues at the Madison Region Economic Partnership. We have Jean Dahlhoff, who's our VP of Talent and Education, and Mark Richardson, who just recently joined us as a leadership and diversity consultant. And both of them will be working on this initiative to sort of carry forward the framework that our LGM team has set and we'll sort of pass off in December when we graduate. So without further ado, I will introduce our panelists. On the end, we have Mike Victorson, who's the CEO and president of M3 Insurance. He spent his entire professional career there, and he sits on a number of boards here in Madison, including United Way of Dane County and several others. Next to him is Claudio Diaz, who's the Chief Human Capital Officer at Whitley. He previously worked for Mercy Health Systems and Disney Institute. He's a member of the Latino Chamber of Commerce here in Dane County, which is one of our partners on this project, and an active member of the Society for Human Resource Management and the American Society for Training and Development. Next we have Mayor Sean Pfaff with the City of Fitchburg. He's also a senior associate with Capital Consultants. The City of Fitchburg is actually our pilot entity or municipality, worked with us on a project to fill positions at the City of Fitchburg commission level. And finally, Paul Jaden, my boss, which is, of course, his claim to fame. He's the president of MadRep, previously served as secretary and CEO of the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, served as the mayor of Green Bay for 8 years, and also the president of the Green Bay Chamber of Commerce. We're hopeful that our two other panelists will join us shortly. We have Colleen Kerr of the Urban League scheduled to arrive, as well as Deb Gilpin, who perhaps just walked in. Perfect timing. No, that's okay. Please, if you're ready to come up and join us, we're just getting started here. And we so appreciate, Deb, you offering the space to us today. So thank you to all of you for being here. And maybe when we sort of wrap up the panel, you can just say a few words about the museum as well.
I will.
Okay, very good. So, onward. I thought we would just start with sort of a very high-level discussion of what economic development is. Clearly, there's a lot of different focus areas within economic development, so I thought we would start by asking our panelists from their own perspectives to sort of take a stand at defining economic development and sort of setting the stage. So, Paul, maybe you can kick us off with that one.
Sure. Economic development, of course, is exactly what it says. It's the process of developing your economy. And we do that by focusing on 4 primary things. First thing you want to do in any community is retain what you have, work to make sure that the businesses that have been with you for decades are going to stay there. Second, that they have an opportunity to grow, in other words, add jobs, invest more in their facilities, and so forth. The third thing is you want to have a robust attraction plan, so you're actually going out and luring other business to your community. And I would submit to you that is, in most areas, a subordinate activity, in other words, retention and growth, are much more important. And then the fourth thing is starting businesses organically in your region, and obviously that means encouraging entrepreneurship, innovation, and cultivating our resources all the way down to the K-12 level.
Well, good afternoon. I'm Sean Path, Mayor of Fitchburg. I view my job as mayor. People think of local government. They want to make sure their streets are plowed, their garbage picked up, their neighborhoods are safe, and fires are fought. But one of the biggest tools, as Paul knows as a former mayor, is what cities can do to work as partners in economic development. We have tools like tax incremental districts and all of those different things, but we also have the ability to build roads and put in infrastructure. And Paul is right. When I first got elected in 2011, I went out and met with all of the existing businesses that we had. Not all of them, but as many as I could. And first of all, I said, thank you. Thank you for being here, and what can we do? And in Fitchburg, over the past few years, you maybe have seen a little bit, we got a lot of good things happening. ProMega is going to be breaking her grand opening of more than $100 million building 2 weeks from this Friday. But we're also seeing a lot of smaller businesses really expand and grow. And in the 3 years that I've been the mayor and worked with this current council, we've really used our tools of tax incremental financing and public investment. There's a 900,000 foot level conversation going on in DC right now, whether or not they're going to shut the government down or not. We don't have to have those, fortunately, in local government, because we're nonpartisan. We work together. But it's really, I think, important that when we debate this philosophy of what's government role in the economy, it has to be a partnership. The private sector wants to know that there's solid leadership, the local government's going to step up and make the investments it needs, and then they can go in and do what they need to do. Sound planning. And I'll leave you with one example on this point. We put in a road called Post Road, which is just south of the Beltline on North Fish Hatchery Road. 40,000 cars a day go up and down North Fish Hatchery Road in Fitchburg. Maybe are you going to and from work. We had talked about that road for 15 years. Madison put their piece in. Why isn't Fitchburg doing this? We finally put the road in. We did it through financing through our tax incremental districts. And that road, $1.5 million it cost us, has now led to almost $73 million of investment. So people can get in, they can get out. And that's how local governments can work in economic development.
Well, I'm so glad Paul and Sean did their homework, because I just say ditto what they say. But at the risk of not wanting to let anybody down, if you think about economic development at the core, and not to sound too much like an economist, is supply and demand, really, at the end of the day. And so what we need to do is look at demand, though, from a different perspective than what we do normally, the tangible goods and services that a community either produces or brings in and somehow farms back out to create growth. I think that sometimes if we can take a look at demand from the world of innovation, areas where we aren't currently top-notch in, but potentially know that there's a market for, and how do we then create more momentum to become a leader in that arena, I think that's what ultimately economic development will spur. And then out of that come two things: growth and more innovation. And that's at the core what happens. You have demand and supply working for you, but if you can generate some of that demand from an intangible perspective, it leads to greater growth and greater innovation, and fuels, in essence, the fire for getting companies to think a little differently, to start acting a little differently, and be responsible in communities. I've got a little bit of age on me, a couple of decades, and I'm sure I'm not alone. We've seen how companies have grown as a result of the responsibility that we expect from them in the community. And so all of that came as a result of a demand. Someone in the grassroots efforts was saying, no longer are we going to accept you dumping toxic waste into our lakes, etc. That demand then led to new ways of thinking about how we scrub or clean our manufacturing environments. And so if somebody would have been proactive in thinking through that before a grassroots efforts told them it was now compliance, I think they would have been the leaders. Therefore, it would have led to further innovation. So I cite that manufacturing example as one way we could have probably been on the cutting edge as businesses, I'm representing an organization that's a little bit more like professional services rather than manufacturing, but we have many manufacturing clients. And so I would say in a nutshell, it's really about demand generation. And how do you get innovation and growth out of that without it being a measure of compliance?
Ditto.
Simple, huh?
Very good. Deb, do you want to weigh in at all?
Yes, I do. I think about economic development a little bit from the what you call infrastructure in your perspective, business perspective, but there's also infrastructure in the human side of it. In our case, for example, helping children learn to be good team members on projects, to gain the skills they need to become part of the workforce, so that they can then support the community and the growth of the economy of communities. So that's a role we play in it, and all of those different elements of having diverse population, balancing the needs of all levels of both the workers and the outcomes of the businesses. So it's supply and demand again, but you have people all along that chain that we need the workforce and the users of those things who have the skills they need.
Finish. I think someone's got to give you your segue to
Oh,
the
thanks.
next question.
Thank
So,
you. You're good.
You've heard that
Set you up for success.
my definition of economic development, and you've heard, of course, the mayor talk about community development. Clearly, that they're very linked. I mean, everything that's happening on East Washington, for instance, around Capitol Square, everything that Sean is doing so well in Fitchburg, that's community development, and ultimately, it's designed to develop the economy. In other words, he doesn't build that road just because people would like a better way to get somewhere. He's building it so he can develop that $73 million of activity. But then the other thing that today in particular, and really is all about what you're talking about today, is that workforce development is economic development. And if we're not paying attention to that human capital, which is a very significant part of our Advanced Now program, then we're not developing our economy effectively, because most people who look at relocating businesses or creating a regional headquarters in an area, the first place they look is how many available welders do you have, how many bachelor's degrees in accounting do you have, how many software publishers do you have. It's all about the workforce, and of course the workforce then is also about diversity and having an appropriate mix of the kinds of skills and talent, as well as race, gender, sexual orientation, etc.
Well, that was just a great segue. Thank you, Paul, to our next
What a
question.
coincidence.
Yes. So let's talk a little bit more about diversity and how engaging diverse populations can really impact economic development, both at a broad level and also very specifically here in Madison, Dane County, and the surrounding region.
Well, I handed out, sorry to be that guy, but I'm a former school teacher, pie chart for the group. And when I was elected in April of 2011, I wanted to know what's the client base, if you will. Who lives in Fitchburg? Who are we serving? And the census had just started to come out, and I saw this pie chart where more than a third of our population is minority population. It just was like, wow. Everybody thought Fitchburg was just a bunch of Irish farmers that like to fight with each other over land. And we still have some wonderful Irish families, the Lacey's and all those folks out there that many of you have ridden on their bike trails past their farms. But think of what you have in front of you. This is the new Dane County. This is the Generation X Dane County. And this is a real wonderful challenge for us. And in Fitchburg, we are living proof of that diversity. Tonight, we're going to have a proclamation. Another handout I gave you here, Hispanic Heritage Month. More than 17% of our population of us are Hispanic. What are we going to do to bring people to the table? And I stress the point about a better connected community. That's what we really try to do. You know, Fitchburg has some significant impediments if you look at it. It's a wonderful community, but we don't have our own school district. We're not all standing at the Friday night football game rooting. Some of our families go to Verona, Oregon, or Madison. So you have that. You have a very population, a very urban core. North Fish Hatchery Road, where 40,000 cars go up and down each day. And I was just in a meeting this morning about making sure we take care of some farmers out in Whalen Road, all part of Fitchburg. We have incredible demographic diversity, as you see in front of you, the geographic diversity, but also the economic diversity. Some of the wealthiest people in Dane County. Coach Alvarez is a constituent lives in Fitchburg. And you have some of those that are on the lower end of the scale. So what do we need to do as leaders? We need to engage. And I've done a couple things, and I hope I've reached out to the minority community a lot, been to their events, enjoy their food, enjoy their camaraderie, and want to have them a seat at the table. Fitchburg did something I'm very proud of. We passed unanimously a redistricting plan where we are a community that has now 2 minority-majority districts. We have a farm, rural, aldermanic district that has 2 alders, and we have an urban core, 2 of those, that has 4 alders. We elected our first Hispanic alder in April. And so we're working with outreach. We're doing it with the pastors in town. I meet with the pastors a lot. The private sector wants to be part of this because the population that's there really wants to grow and be part of the community, and we have to reach out to them. We've done it also with, I think, good law enforcement. We've hired 3 or 4 cops last year. And I'm not saying this to get all political, but the point is you're putting together in place solid communities where people can be at the table. And if there's something that's missing in Dane County, why I was so excited when I had lunch with Betsy about this a few weeks ago, people want to be at the table. New generation of people want to be at the table. We're seeing that in Fitchburg. And I know we're going to get into specific commissions and boards, but this is who we are serving, and this is Dane County, and it's not going to change. We have a great place to live in this area of the state. And so I hope that we can work together to do that, because I'll close by saying of those 40,000 cars that go up and down Fish Hatchery Road each day, not enough of them are turning right to get off of there to reinvest in the community. It's still double-digit unemployment, and that's wrong. We need to do better. So I'm glad that we're having this conversation today, because you need to go out and find your colleagues and have them get involved.
Mayor Pfaff, if I can follow, you have been such a strong supporter. I was on the board of directors at the Latino Chamber of Commerce for about 4 years, and your support continually of our chamber has been a testament to the passion that you just showed and stated. And I believe that the word engagement is the key here in this question. How does engaging diverse populations impact economic development? Engagement is an active verb. Engage. It's something we have to do to something. And so we can't passively lie back and expect something will happen, germinate from the ground like a good plant. We need to foster the environment where then others engage and create that domino effect so that everybody is there. I mentioned that as a precept to something that came out of the Latino Chamber of Commerce, which is the Latino Professionals Association. On October 9th, Julio, you don't mind if I do a strong plug here in a minute here. But on October 9th, right here at the Monona Terrace, we are launching the Latino Professionals Association. And we hope that there will be between 250 to 300 professionals there from Latino and Latina backgrounds that are a strong voice in this community, irrespective of the invitation we may have had to be a voice. And I think that's why this type of association, as an outgrowth of the Latino Chamber of Commerce, can really manifest what the word engagement means. That outgrowth is something we need to spur in many other environments. I don't think we're doing it sufficiently well. I will speak candidly and somewhat humbly and vulnerably that even our own organization, as I look at the population of Wifley, and for those of you that don't know the Wifley name, we're the 23rd largest accounting firm in the nation. We have an office here in Madison, and of the 1,100 or so associates throughout those 23 cities and 2 in India, 11% is Hispanic. And I want to see that number grow. And of course, when you include Asians and African Americans and others, the number grows, but I'm focused on what we could do in the LPA, the Latino Professional Association, to try to bring more of that proactive request for involvement to our communities. I firmly believe, as I look around the room, I think I may have, the same perspective that everybody else has here, that at least half of us aren't necessarily in a diverse pool. So what is it we could do to create more excitement about organizations and programs like LGM bringing more diversity in? And kudos to you that there is diversity here. That's a big, big plug for what's being done right. Can we get to the next level? Can we take it a step further? I firmly believe we can. And I just think we need to proactively engage those discussions on many realms besides race as well. Thank you for your partnership that you've always had for our programs.
Just a couple of quick things
Yeah.
on the how does it impact the economic development. First, the first thing I think we have to think about is that we're all involved in economic development, and that candidly, we often I don't think of ourselves that way. I think the second piece is it's pretty easy to get cocooned in your group of friends and the people that you hang out with. I know it is for me. I watch that happen to the people that work at M3. And if you want to create a place either in your business, in your town, in your community, in your industry that sets up an environment where it can be explosive, and that includes you, by the way, getting to benefit from that, then I would encourage you to think about what this looks like. Because I'm a recovering sleepwalker on this issue. What that used to sound like at M3 is, I don't know, Claudio, I put my job descriptions out there. I don't have any problem hiring somebody of color. If a Latino walked in, it's not like my HR department's got some kind of written edict over there that says, hey, don't hire any Latinos, okay? Not at all. But that word engage that Claudio talked about is an active verb. And as I described to Mark, one of the big things that we're working on at M3, and this can be uncomfortable, is you got to change who you hang out with. How many people like changing who they hang out with? Not a lot of people in this room, regardless of your male, female, what color your skin is, how much education you have, what generation you're from. That can be weird. Let's keep it real, right?
Yeah.
It can be weird. But when you think about this in terms of economic development, I think you have to think about how it not only impacts you and your business, but the place that you get to live, work, and play. Because it's real easy if you don't really engage in that to kind of gloss over it. A lot of nice business sounding kind of words, right? Who isn't for diversity these days? You know what I'm saying? But it's also easy to kind of have about a 30 to 45 second conversation about that and then go on to the next thing. Take care of your family, your spouse, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, whatever you do. But it truly is, it takes energy, because in some ways, for many of us, it can just be aggressive in bringing the Hmong community to Green Bay. And the second was, of course, the influx of the Hispanic population, who were primarily coming to Green Bay to work in meatpacking plants. And so as we added 12 to 15,000 Hispanics and about 7,000 or 8,000 Hmong, the thing that you could guarantee about that population was the first generation was going to be poor, and their prospects were limited to menial jobs that the majority of the population weren't going to take. So as you look at developing your community, you have to look at it strictly in terms of the business case for diversity, in addition to saying, yeah, my heart tells me I've got to do something for this segment of our population. So you look at the needs in the community, and you have to be honest. They're going to create stress on our education system, because we need more ESL teachers. There's going to be a stress in our law enforcement. There's going to be a stress in our housing, in human services. However, if we don't address the fact that that second generation in particular is going to ultimately, or should ultimately, take their place among a more successful segment of our population, and instead of relegating them to the poverty that they came here with, then your community is doomed as well. So you have to recognize that there's value in giving the poorest some hope,
And I'll just illustrate that very quickly for you. If you assume that every segment of our population has talent and intellect like a bell curve. In other words, the African American community, the Caucasian community, all have roughly 10% super achievers and 10% who aren't achieving well, and everyone else in the middle. The one thing, other than the fact that they're intelligent and successful, potentially successful, one thing you know about this top 10%, particularly in terms of people of color, is that they have opportunities that the low end doesn't have. And because they have opportunities, they're also mobile. The white community will have opportunities because they see a ladder that every white male in history has seen. In other words, opportunity is right before them. People of color may see that ladder somewhere else, and they'll move to Chicago or San Francisco. And we have an obligation to keep our best and brightest here no matter what. But I think we have an obligation in particular to reach out to those people of color and other minorities to guarantee that they don't see greener pastures somewhere else. And the bottom line on that, all of that, is if we don't pay attention to that segment of our population, then those 19,000 people I had in Green Bay who came here poor are going to guarantee that their next generation will stay in Green Bay and be poor. Because all of their best and brightest will have realized it's cooler to live in Madison, or it's cooler to live in Chicago and San Francisco. And we need to be in a situation where we're looking at all of these bell curves around the country and say, this is the place you want to be. Let's steal everybody else's top 10% and bring them to Madison.
I actually wanted to also invite Mark Perry has very recently left the Urban League, and so we would welcome your perspective on any of these topics. And also, if any of our classmates have questions, please feel free to just shout them out.
I'm pushing a full-fledged fro here, though, so if you don't mind, I will not be putting on a hat. You good with that? As I stepped out, I'm sure the conversation sort of ebbed and flowed, so I don't know where it went, and I came back in and Mr. Victorson was talking. I try not to listen to anything Mike has to say. So
Can you feel the love?
yeah, feel the love. Actually, Mike and I went to college together, so we know each other well, and if anybody wants Polaroids, I do have a couple of them.
Careful.
Then again, he probably has them too. Just to wrap up the current question, and then I'll just drop in. I don't know if anybody's, the economy is not one thing, it's many things. And so when we talk about economic development, as Mayor Pfaff did, and I think he hit it right on the head, people want a seat at the table. All people want a seat at the table. And so what you might do to provide and to create opportunity for one group might be different than what you might create and provide to provide opportunity for another group, because they're at different stages. Maybe they are first generation. Maybe this English is their second language. Maybe their parents or their caregivers were unemployed. So realizing that we're not a homogeneous city anymore, and the economy is not one thing, it's a lot of things. So development needs to look differently in different parts of that economy. And so I'll just say that and just layer that on to whatever was said when I stepped out, and then we just go.
Okay, great.
I'll just
Thanks.
add one quick thing. I talked about Promega and its building. We're ecstatic about that. But not everybody can be a bioscientist, or not everybody wants to be. So we have to also work with expectations. It's okay to make things in this country and work outside. I grew up on a dairy farm in western Wisconsin. My father's a farmer. My brother and sister and I are the first generation to go to college. We can't just have expectations of where if you don't do this, you're a failure. We need to get in there and work with people and let them strive to where they want to go and lead them in that direction. I know this is hard to believe, but there's still manufacturing in Dane County. Sub-Zero, Playcon. Those are jobs that we need to fill. And that's the conversation we have to have as well. And that's the beauty of Dane County, is you can have all types of jobs. State service is very honorable. It's had a tough go the last couple of years, but it still drives our economy, but it's not the only thing. And that's where, again, back to the point of the seat at the table and policymakers that want to stress that. And that's, I think, the way that we can really get people from all walks of life to succeed and really pursue their own goals and dreams on their own, with a little bit of assistance at times through public schools and other things like that. But as long as we give a chart and a path for people to find their success, I think we can really have a society that does well.
Great. So to hone in a little bit on this specific project that our team is working on, could you all comment a little bit on how you would characterize the current situation and population of our boards, committees, and commissions here in Dane County as it relates to diversity, and comment on sort of the status quo of how that reflects the actual makeup of our demographics of our population. And then as a second part to that, to maybe reflect on how that might compare to other communities. Deb, I know you just recently joined us from Phoenix. Paul's already spoken about Green Bay. Claudia, I know you've been in Florida. You've probably all been elsewhere. So let's talk about the lay of the land a little bit.
Yeah, I guess I get to take the lead on this one. And I get, my perception and observation is that we have a mixed bag in Madison. My work in nonprofit sectors, especially that's led by United Way work and the people that connects me to, I think you'd be very proud of your community. The people that are being recruited to be on and serve in those boards and those solution teams represent the very best cross-section of people. It might even surprise you how wide and deep a cross-section of people that they find. You know, whether it's gender, race, age, generation, you name it. Economic. It's spectacular. And it's a very thoughtful piece of the community that, you know, I hope you all take a lot of pride in as leaders in our community, and give serious thought to how, as leaders, as a part of Leadership Greater Madison, you can be engaged with and support, you know, in your career here in town. Because these people are making a huge difference, and I think one of the reasons why it's such a robust solution is because of its diversity. Shifting to the private sector, and Claudio gave some statistics about Wipfli. The private sector, especially when you leave the large businesses, whom, you know, hanging out with Mark and getting connected with some people at places like the Network of Black Professionals, you know, there's maybe 4 to 6 companies in Madison that are safe for people of color. And I think you know what that means. They feel safe going to work there because their population already has, and that's not a quote from me, by the way, their population already has a significant amount of people of color or a significant amount of diversity in which they enter that workforce and feel like, you know, I'm not going to get singled out. I'm not going to feel strange working here. I got an opportunity to advance, make a better, you know, life for myself and my family. When you step down from that group of, like I said, 6 or maybe 8 large businesses in Madison, I think the private sector has an enormous way to go. I think the diversity that exists in leadership positions, and I've kind of chronicled what I meant by that before, is woefully inadequate. And a huge part of it stems back to some things that we've already talked about. We need to change who we're hanging out with. And if we don't, it's not gonna change. We need to have the courage to literally reach out to people and ask them to take a chance.
And where we're hanging out with.
Yeah, I got introduced to this organization called, you ready for this? Because most of you, my guess is if you're being honest, you had no idea this organization existed. The Network of Black Professionals. I'm a pretty well-traveled guy. I've sat on a lot of boards. A year and a half ago, I got introduced to this organization. I had no idea who they were. None. They said, you know, would you sponsor a lunch? They came over. there was 35 members of that group that came in our doors. Most businesses in town have never had 35 people of color walk through their front door together, let alone maybe over the course of 10 years. And they sat down and we talked. And because of who we changed, in essence who we were hanging out with, one of them became our employee within about 35, 40 days. Weird.
Well, and there was a, if you don't mind.
No, jump in.
There was a moment during that meeting. I was at that meeting.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And there was a moment during that meeting that Mike's a pretty cool customer, and you know, he just kind of was. The flow of the conversation was kind of going, and we're talking about the state of the state, right? And somebody said, "Well, I'm beginning to get a different feeling about you and your company than I had before."
Yeah, that's right.
And Mike kind of, sat up and didn't really want to react, too quickly, but he just kind of sat up, and I could see him. He was thinking, "Well, what idea did you have before?" And there was only one person of color that had worked there that was really active in the community that anybody really knew, and that person wasn't there anymore. That person had left the company, and so on the street, if you will, there was a perception about M3 within certain circles and certain networks, and it was a perception that Mike wasn't aware of. And it wasn't like everybody was carrying banners and saying, "Oh, it's bad to go to work at M3. Don't go to work there if you're a person of color." But it was something that was said under. It was under their breath, and it was under the waterline, right? And so after they spent an hour with Mike, they got a different feeling about the company. And I think the takeaway was, if we're not proactive in this space, then we could end up being reactive to some thinking that's going on that we're not even aware of. And so that's the big picture. The big picture is, if we're not proactive and we don't realize that today's kids are tomorrow's workforce.
Yep.
And so you know what the balance in the school district is, right? It's 52% kids of color in grade school. So
In Madison.
in Madison. And if you took that and you kind of run that out, that's the workforce in 15 years. So if you haven't figured out how to engage, and that it's of value, in 10 years, who are you going to hire if you own a business?
I would also add too that you have Fitchburg. You know Fitchburg because you live in this area. But if you're at a police recruitment workshop, and there was a study about Detroit had so many cops that they needed to fill, and cops are leaving Detroit left and right or whatever, for whatever reasons, as we all know. But anyway, they don't really know where Fitchburg is. They think of Madison. So okay, we get them here in Madison. And we've done all kinds of work. We need to get better. And I've talked to my human resources director, and our chiefs are out looking for, but we also need communities of color to respond to that. I've reached out a few times and have asked for names of people to serve on commissions and boards. And I've gotten a few, and some have fallen through because of family issues or child care or whatever. But when you talk to people, you gotta say that there's room, and you gotta get involved. Because we need more Hispanic cops. We wanna hire them on merit, we wanna hire them on quality, we want to hire them that they can do the job, they pass the competency set. We need more African American cops. And many of them that come to this area choose Madison first because Madison pays a little bit more, and I think they pay for folks to get master's degrees. We haven't quite done that yet in Fitchburg. But we need people to step up when we ask too. Because more and more asks are coming. You're going to go out and ask, and people are going to say no, and you got to find out a way for them to say yes. And that's going to be the next challenge here. Because this community, there's a reason why the issue of gay marriage, whatever your opinion is on that or not, you know that the polling has moved the last 8 years on that issue. Because young people don't see it as a problem. And as Generation X and Y, and I don't even know, millennials, I guess they are now. Listen to me, a classic Generation X guy. Diversity means nothing. My nieces and nephews go to school in Eau Claire and Cross. They have kids of color in their class all the time. I grew up in a small town in western Wisconsin. We had a substitute teacher that came out one day with 30 kids in the class, and she said, "How many of you grew up on a dairy farm?" 26 of us raised our hand. And the only one that, the 4 others either were milk haulers or veterinarians. So there wasn't a lot of diversity there. But that's completely changed now. Opinions are changing. So the onus is on us as leaders to go find people. But the onus is frankly on members of the communities of color to step up. And then hopefully we can set a venue for them where they feel comfortable. They got to be part of it. I would love to appoint more people of color to boards, and I hope I will in Fitchburg soon.
I think that co-interrelationship that you're talking about, Sean, is so critical. I will answer the question from my perspective in Orlando. I was part of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce of Central Florida. And no doubt the mix is completely different than we are here in Wisconsin. So I am not blind to the obvious statistics. What I think, though, may have happened several decades ago is that the realization was pronounced at a higher level than potentially what it was in the 50s and 40s, that we're not going to change this unless we change ourselves. And by ourselves, I mean the collective, and that's why I want to piggyback on your comment. It's both sides being able to coexist, but not exist just to have harmony, exist to create tension and conflict that results in a positive gain. I'm not talking about tension and conflict like wars and gun battles. I'm talking about the healthy tension that can help us innovate a little differently. And I believe that in the Central Florida market, when you are driving through, if you're shocked to see a billboard in complete Latin, wow, why would that shock you? But I'll tell you, as a Latin American, the first time I was in Miami as a young kid and read a Latin billboard, I said, "Where's the English version? Is it on the other side?" There must be some answer here. And I think the education for me happened early in my life. And then as a professional, I've been trying to challenge our organization. For those of you that don't know, we're a partnership. And so if you take a look at our 143 partners, even the gender diversity is an issue we want to continue fixing. Someone mentioned earlier that if we take, I think it was Paul, if I'm not mistaken, you mentioned something about taking the experiences that people have gone through and by no means do it under the myth of quotas that was around when affirmative actions first started. We're not out to get quotas. I want the very best people at Whiffling. I do not want numbers for numbers' sake, because then the quality of services we provide you as clients tanks, and ultimately you talk about economic undevelopment. That's what will do it. However, I do have a voice. I'm responsible for 16 HR professionals that then can influence over 1,100 associates to say, how proactive can we be to think ahead? So we have rolled out, in fact today our CEO and in the next 2 weeks is rolling out Vision 2020. And one of those pieces of Vision 2020, the key strategies, is diversity. And we're going to focus on gender first, but then extend it to other avenues of diversity. And what we're trying to tell as a senior leadership to all of our associates is, this is not about quotas. This is about proactivity today that will generate outcomes 2020. So we have a short, and I call it short, 7 years to reverse this trend and to heed Mike's call to hang out with different people. And as a result of that, as leaders especially, we can start grooming and developing those that potentially we would have discounted or not even thought of. Not necessarily discount like, I don't want you, but not pushed forward as quickly as maybe someone who looks, thinks, acts, believes the way I do. Again, I challenge each of you. You are the future of Madison, so think about your role in future classes at LGM. How can you then create a little bit more onus in the future to get that, to spur that activity around diversity, not to typify the myth of affirmative action, but to really get the value of diversity and different thoughts to the table. And I think that's, and when you said the experience factor and how much more do we gain from